All right, so good morning. All right, so I think this is start. Good morning. So how it's looking is that you guys are going to follow along with me. You're going to follow the YouTube video. I'm going to hit pause when it needs to be, or I'm going to tell you when to pause it, I should say. I know this is probably different than what you've done in the past, but hopefully this helps the learning and you can hit some of these standards before your big case test. So the agenda for the day, let me pull that up. That's what I'm doing right now. Sorry. All right, so just a little review or the agenda. Let me switch the camera angles so you can see your actual agenda and all that. So the learning objective, that's what we're about to do. This is the agenda. We're going to do a slideshow. You should go ahead and get out your slideshow notes. Then we're going to do the read aloud and highlight some notes in that. We'll watch another video, and then you'll do a check for understanding if everything goes correctly. Now, if you need to pause this video, I recommend that. I'm going to try to remind you when to pause it so you can copy down anything you need to. And then in the other video, or not the other video, at the end of this video or during it, I'll get right in a minute. I'll tell you when to pause it so you can read aloud to each other so you don't have to hear my annoying voice the whole time. All right, so Tennessee State Standards 8.26 explain how conflicts between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton resulted in the emergence of two political parties by analyzing their views on foreign policy, economic policy, and national bank, and strict versus loose interpretation of the Constitution. All right, so Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. Let's talk about these standards real fast. So we know that Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, they are both on what? Tell your neighbor right now. All right, so hopefully you figured out George Washington's cabinet. So Thomas Jefferson, now I'm going to give you, if you haven't figured out, I'm going to give you a few seconds to tell your neighbor. So Thomas Jefferson, his role is what on the cabinet? Tell your neighbor. All right, so he's Secretary of State. So Secretary of State does what? Tell your neighbor. All right, their job is to deal with foreign affairs. Alexander Hamilton, his job is Secretary of what? Treasury. So his job is to do what? Tell your neighbor. All right, good. So that's their job. So they have different jobs, but they've also different views. Remember that Thomas Jefferson is an anti-federalist and Alexander Hamilton is a federalist. So with that, we know that Alexander Hamilton is a strong supporter of what? Tell your neighbor. Thomas Jefferson is an anti-federalist, so he's not a strong supporter of the Constitution. All right, so now they've got these political parties, even though in Mr. D's personal opinion, the political parties had already started with the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Now they're really going to emerge because George Washington has brought them on. They're going to argue about the foreign policy of the French Revolution. Remember, we talked the other day about, do you help your best friend in the situation of the fight, or do you let them just get their punishment and you go into the 9th grade, or do you stay in the 8th grade? So remember that America, we are challenged with, do we remain neutral? Do we help the British? Do we help the French? What do we do? And we learned that we remained neutral. We didn't help anybody. All right, so the economic policy, or how are they going to tax? This is going to be Alexander Hamilton. Follow my mouse. That's his big claim to fame. And then you got the national bank. So we're going to make a bank for the whole United States. And strict versus loose interpretation of the Constitution. Now, what do you think interpretation means? Talk to your neighbor about that. All right, so an interpretation is like, how do you interpret something? What does that mean to you? And that's where Jefferson and Hamilton, are going to argue about what the Constitution says and how it can be read. People still argue about it. All right, so our learning targets. To analyze the economic policy, national bank, and strict versus loose interpretation of the Constitution in order to summarize the beginning of political parties with Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. Okay. So we got Alexander Hamilton. Man was so famous, he got his own musical. So his financial plan. No, Alexander Hamilton believed that the federal government should be stronger than the states' governments. Remember, with the Articles of Confederation, the state governments are stronger than the federal government. Alexander Hamilton is a huge proponent of a federal government. He wants federal government to be big and strong, very powerful. This is what him and Thomas Jefferson are going to argue over. Now, if you want to pause it because you have to get any of the notes, I'm not sure if you do or not, but if you do, pause it. All right, so Hamilton's financial plan. So remember that we're in debt from the war. It's still in debt. It's been over 10 years. It's been 10 years at least by this point. So we're still in huge debt. We've got to figure out a way to pay it. So he wants to raise the federal government's revenues through tariffs and taxes. So a tariff is a tax on imported goods. So anything that comes in, like for example, with signing neutrality with Britain and France in the French Revolution, we're actually getting goods from Great Britain. So we get to tax those goods. So that's money to the federal government. So that boosts the economy, it boosts the government's funding, and so Alexander Hamilton, his job looks like he's doing something, and we're getting rid of the debt. I'll like pause it if you need to get any of this. I don't think you do, but maybe. All right, so the financial plan. Tariffs are going to encourage the growth of American industry, meaning buy American made. So anything that comes in, we've got a tax. However, because the tax is going to be higher on that, people are going to buy American made. You see that a lot with, especially with cars. People want to buy a Chevy, Dodge, or Ford because they're American made. They don't want to buy foreign cars, and just sometimes foreign products. If you see on the back it says made in China, people won't buy for that reason, or maybe cheaper made. And also, if you buy American made, it gives money back into the economy and helps people. So it's also going to raise money for the federal government. All right, so Hamilton's financial plan. So going by this picture, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think about this picture? Talk to your neighbor right now. Pause it and talk to your neighbor. What do you think is going on? All right, so it's a bank, obviously. So Hamilton's financial bank. Now, at the beginning of the lesson, we talked about a federal bank, and that's exactly what's going to happen. So we're going to create a national bank. This is for the federal government to be able to have a bank throughout the whole United States. It's a safe place to keep the government's money. It can make loans to businesses and would issue paper currency. So these are the big things that makes us have a national bank throughout the whole United States. It's not a crazy idea. Most countries have one. We just want to jump on board and do it. And we'll become so successful, we'll be one of the most successful national banks in the world. And also, last but not least, it's going to strengthen the federal government, and that's Hamilton's big master plan. He wants to make the federal government once again stronger than the state's government. Right, so Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is going to dramatically because he does not like a strong federal government. He believes in states' rights. Remember, he's from Virginia. He's from the South. He makes his money off of farming. He's going to stick up for the farmers. That's a cool thing about Jefferson that we can really relate to growing up in Tennessee, since we have friends and family members, or maybe you even farm yourself. So that's Thomas Jefferson's thing. He's like, look, you're just using the state's money, these farmers, you're making money off them to pay for your debt. Figure it out. It's kind of his thing. That's your issue, not ours. By the way, you guys don't have the Thomas Jefferson picture slide. I just kind of threw that in last minute. All right, so with this is going to become the interpretation of the Constitution. You have a strict construction. Only what the Constitution clearly states. It's favored by Jefferson and James Madison. So if the Constitution doesn't say it, then you can't do it. It is what it is. These are rules. We're not going to bend them. We're not going to make it flexible. We're not going to bend it to our needs. No, it is what it is. It says what it says. If it doesn't say it, you can't do it. Now, if you notice, James Madison's in here. James Madison was a huge Federalist, and with that, that's what made him a strict constructionist. Now, Thomas Jefferson was an anti-Federalist, so they actually were opposing a few years back. Now they're on the same team. Loose construction. This means that when you look at the Constitution, you can kind of bend it to your needs. You can make it work for you. So, like, yeah, the rule says this, but I'm going to interpret it as this. That way, I can get my way. The Constitution should be flexible to meet the needs of the country. They'll form this under elastic clause. We'll talk about that in your reading. And this is favored by Alexander Hamilton and John Adams. Now, the neat thing is Hamilton and Jefferson are both on Washington's cabinet at the time. Madison and John Adams are not. John Adams is actually the vice president, but he's going to be a loose constructionist. The reason that they argue about these points on the creation of the national bank is because Hamilton feels that because of this elastic clause that they should be able to make this national bank, that they should be able to write it, the Congress should be able to vote it in, and it should happen, or they should be able to, the president should just be able to sign off on it because he's the president. And the Jefferson and Madison are just like, no, there's nothing in there that says that. There's nothing about the Congress or the president can just do it because they feel like it. No, we need to follow the Constitution. All right, so assumption of states' debts. So they want to cement states and national government, meaning that everybody will fall under the national government. States with large debts would be like Massachusetts, New England for the most part, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, all those states are in a large debt. So they want the help of the states in the South, Georgia, Carolinas, and Virginia. They want them to come in and pay for it. The southern states are not a fan of this. It'll become a North versus South issue. Don't think of it like the Civil War. It's just more of a North versus South, like people in the South are farmers, North are industry. Compromise. North got assumption of debts, while South got national capital moved to Potomac. All right, so the rise of political parties, and this is the last thing. Now, if I've underlined it, you need to underline it or star it. So the Federalist, you've got John Adams and Alexander Hamilton. They are your Federalists. They've been Federalists since A1, since day one. They've been doing it since the beginning. Trusted elite. What I mean by that is that they are the like the higher class, the rich people. Manufacturing and commerce. They're going to be big into things made in factories and trade. Pro-British. When I say that, I mean that they are for the British in the French Revolution. Excuse me. They are for that because they're doing trade with the British. They get when the British bring in goods, they get to the Americans get to tax that. So like, no, we want to keep trading with the British. They believe in a strong central government, very strong central government. When you think of Federalists, just think of strong central government. I'm going to skip down. They believe also in a Bank of the United States. They are for it because they believe that that'll give more power and money to the federal government. All right, so now we've got Democratic Republicans. Now, when I say Democratic Republicans, I don't want you getting that confused with Democrats and Republicans. It's a huge difference between the two. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, these are your two proponents of the Democratic Republicans. They trusted the common man, agriculture, economy, yeoman farm, meaning they're for farmers, whether rich or poor. They want to represent the common man, the hard worker. They're pro-French Revolution, meaning that they're for this because the French are headed towards more of a democracy instead of a monarchy. So they're really for that. Also, Jefferson is big on, the French helped us out during the American Revolution. We need to give it back. They're more into states' rights than a strong federal government. They don't like that idea. They're more for, honestly, Articles of Confederation, even though James Madison was a Federalist at one time. Now they want to get back to the states' rights. And they're afraid of the Bank of the United States because they feel that that is going to give too much power to the federal government. And that's what they're scared of. All right, so Federalists, just so you have a view. John Adams is going to be your second president. He's George Washington's vice president at the time we're talking about. Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury. That'll be his highest reign of power. He won't move on to vice president or president. And then you'll have Democratic Republicans. You'll have Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Thomas Jefferson going to be your second vice president, your third president, and James Madison will be your fourth president. So, take a little pause, just one moment, go ahead and pause. Okay, so the first Bank of the United States. So here's how it's going to work today, or work now, I'm sorry. You guys are going to read aloud. I'm going to tell you the sections to read. You guys are going to choose individuals to read. Ms. Megan, you can pick whoever you want to read, and then they just read it aloud. So, and then I'll tell you I'll kind of explain it, and then I'll tell you what to highlight and make notes for. So, first Bank of the United States. Somebody read this section, this paragraph right here, and then somebody read these three bullets right here. So go ahead and pause the video and then do that. And then once you're done reading, unpause me, and then you can go ahead and I'll tell you what to highlight. So go ahead and pause. All right, so Alexander Hamilton. So his idea with the federal bank is that, or the national bank, excuse me, is that it's going to make the federal government stronger. So he needs to create a national bank for the economy. That's his big deal. So you want to go ahead and highlight just this whole first part. You want to go ahead and highlight it. All right, now the second part. Now, Thomas Jefferson thought such a bank would expand the power and influence of the federal government. beyond the limits outlined in the Constitution. So this is where we get back to the strict versus loose interpretive Constitution. Alexander Hamilton's the loose, and if you could actually out beside Alexander Hamilton, just go ahead and write that. Put loose. Loose interpretation of the, or just put loose interpretation, you'll be good. I kind of crap can't see right there. And then by Thomas Jefferson, will make me do another one if it'll let me. Strict interpretation. Now I know it's not that big, so Miss Megan, if you could make it maybe possibly a little bit bigger for me, I'll put it over here. But it is about Thomas Jefferson. I'll even draw an arrow for you so you'll know where it's going to. All right, so even though they've got different interpretations of the Constitution, Congress is going to make it a thing. Congress is going to pass it because Hamilton is able to persuade people in Congress to vote for it because they know that we're in so much debt and we need this money. So they make it happen. So with this, our positives is that now there's a national bank. I can go from one state to another state and deposit my stuff. Think of it like a Regions Bank. It's a pretty well-known bank. I joined Regions literally when I lived in McKenzie, Tennessee, and then I went to St. Louis. There was literally one 2 miles from my house when I lived in St. Louis, and now there's one in Trenton that I can go to whenever I need to go there. So think of it like that, but it's the federal bank for the United States. Our U.S. currency now is better value, and if the federal government needs a loan, it can go to the national bank. And also this is going to help us get support with the other countries. They're going to take us more serious because of this. It's now we're going to move on. So we've done Whiskey Rebellion, so long farewell with the farewell address. So Hamilton versus Jefferson. So we're back at this. This is where you get your political parties from. So Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson differed in their ideas about the proper role of the government. We've already established that. You've got Alexander Hamilton, who is a loose interpreter of the Constitution. You got Thomas Jefferson, who is strict constructionist with a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton wants a national bank and wants to give the federal government all the power. Thomas Jefferson wants the federal government to not have any of the power. All right, so if you could go ahead and hit pause, get somebody to read to just Miss Megan, however you want to do it, just read so much and then someone else take over. Or actually, I got a better idea. What we will do is everybody at their groups, at their tables, somebody read Hamilton wanted and then another person read Jefferson wanted. Too easy. All right, go ahead and hit me on pause and then I'll tell you what to highlight and make notes of. All right, so pause me. Okay, so now what you need to know about Hamilton in this is that, so once again, like I keep on saying, he wants a strong central government. You got to remember that about Hamilton. That is his, that's his main thing. That's what he's about. So you want to highlight that. The elastic clause in Article 1 in the Constitution that's kind of a saying that like Congress has power to do this, such and such. So this is going to give them his national bank. So he also argues for the country's manufacturing to make the nation's economy healthy. He supports tariffs. Let's see, he wants a big military. That's kind of his thing. He wants a strong navy. He believes, though, that we should remain neutral in the French Revolution. And like he sympathizes with the British because they're bringing goods into America, so that's making us money. All right, now the Jefferson thing, what you need to know about that. Jefferson favored giving authority to the states, meaning that he wants more power to the states because he knows that's how he's going to make his money. Believed that a life of farming bred virtue and independence, essential traits for citizens and democracy. And he felt the United States should be sympathetic towards France prior to a prior treaty with the country, and because he believed France was moving towards democracy. So he believes we should be helping France because they helped us and they're moving towards democracy instead of a monarchy. So let me highlight that. That'll help you guys out a lot. All right, so hopefully you got that. Now, if you didn't get anything, I'll leave it up here for a few more seconds for you to highlight. If you need to pause it, pause it. All right, so Jefferson's going to resign after this. He's had enough, and he is out. So the continuing disagreements with Alexander and Hamilton tired Thomas Jefferson. If you actually go back and listen to one last time from Hamilton, it starts off with George Washington needs to speak with Alexander Hamilton, and Alexander Hamilton starts off with, whatever he said, sir, or whatever happened, Thomas Jefferson started it, and then George Washington says, Thomas Jefferson resigned this morning. So then Jefferson just doesn't like the way the country's moving under George Washington's presidency. And he, in my opinion, makes a very bold, brave thing by quitting because he just can't be a part of something he doesn't believe in. So based on policies enacted during Washington's presidency, Jefferson often felt that Hamilton had successfully won the president to his perspective. Jefferson strongly disagreed with Hamilton's British leanings. In 1793, he resigned as Washington's Secretary of State. So at this point of the lesson, what I want you to do is compare and contrast. I want you to describe 3 views that Hamilton had about the government economy, and then describe 3 views that Thomas Jefferson had. So I want you actually to fill these boxes in and go ahead and pause me. And then if you need room out, you can write to the side or just write small if you can, but that's what I want you to do. And then go ahead and pause me. All right, so the beginning of political parties. So this is where you will get your actual political parties. So the beginning of political parties, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson's disagreements made it clear that the 2 different views of how to run the country existed. As a result of these differing views, 2 political parties emerged. So the election of 1796. So go ahead and pause me. Go ahead and you read to your neighbor. You and your neighbor read this part. So pause me. All right, so with these 2 party systems, so you've got John Adams, who's going to run. He's going to represent the Federalists, and you've got Thomas Jefferson, who's going to represent the Democratic Republicans. Now, at this time, it's very different from today. Like when Trump and President Trump and Joe Biden ran against each other, they had their own vice presidents picked. Donald Trump had Vice President Mike Pence, and Joe Biden has Kamala Harris. So with that, this is very different. This is going to come along later in your Constitution with one of your amendments. But before all that, whoever got the most electoral votes was president. And whoever lost running for the president became the vice president. This is very different from what we do today because of political parties. So John Adams, the Federalist candidate, won the election by 3 electoral college votes. Like I said, because it was different, Thomas Jefferson would become the got second place, and therefore he would become the vice president. So you've got 2 guys from 2 totally different political backgrounds and 2 different ideas, and this is how they're doing things. So this is a way to look at it. We've already went over this in your the slideshow, the first part of the video, but this is a good review if you want to look over it. So Democratic Republicans, party of Thomas Jefferson, Federalist, party of Alexander Hamilton. If you could, beside this though, I would like for you to put John Adams as well, since he would move on to be president and Alexander Hamilton wouldn't. Democratic Republicans, strict Constitution or interpretation of the Constitution. What it says is what it says. Federalists, a loose interpretation, meaning they bend it to their will. Democratic Republicans, state governments over federal. I would highlight that. It's kind of just to drive it back home. And then the Federalists favor the federal government. They want the federal government to have more power over state government. Let's see. The Democratic Republicans, they favor farming, and Federalists favor manufacturing, like factories. And then the Democratic Republicans oppose the National Bank, and the Federalists support the National Bank. And think of farmers today living in rural areas and Federalists living in the city. And last but not least, the Democratic Republicans support the French Revolution because the French helped us, and the Federalists oppose the French Revolution because they want to keep ties with the British. Even though we were at war with them, they are giving us goods, and we can tax that. So that is all of that. So you guys are gonna watch another video that kind of gives you a better idea of the National Bank. and more of a visual of the Federalists versus, or excuse, the Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans. I know that I may have went fast on this. I recommend, if I did, if you guys have time, to watch it again in class. There's plenty of time. If not, I'm on YouTube. Go watch it on YouTube. So I hope this did help. I hope you guys have a great day. After you watch the other video, you guys are going to go into the computer lab and do a case test, or not a case test, not a case test. You're going to do a Mastery Connect. So have a great day. Can't wait to see you guys.